Story 1. So I had just finished something similar to high school. I live in Europe, and I was searching for a university to go to. After a bit of searching, I found one rather far away from my parents' home, so I decided to move out. Since I wasn't really getting a good salary with my McDonald's side job, I just jumped at the first shared apartment I could find. The apartment was rather big, and we had space for a maximum of 8 people. When I entered, there were 5 living there in total, so I was quickly accepted. Let me introduce you to the owner of the apartment, who is also a drug dealer. We'll call him D. Contrary to what you might think, he is a really nice person. He was in his last year of studying and was actually doing really good grades and everything. Also, he did more chores than he had to, paid 50% of the rent, and was generally your to-go person when you had a heartbreak or something similar. Really nice guy. I'll have to introduce you to a girl, which we will call Kelly. Kelly had started university at the same time as I did, and she took similar courses like I did. We both studied software development, but she went into the security sector while I went into general application development. That meant that we were having a few courses together, like physics. In general, she was also really nice and chill. The other 3 students are not really important for this story. Just keep in mind that everyone who was here was usually very nice. Fast forward a few years and things are going well. D finished his studies but stayed at the apartment after finding a job as an accountant. Kelly just got her first boyfriend. Really hard for her since she's nearly as introverted as me, and other people left and came. Life was really good. But then, he came. We'll call him the idiot for short. He was tall, intelligent, and had the worst attitude-y personality I've seen in a while. Also, he took the same courses as Kelly. He didn't pay his rent regularly, he wasn't doing any chores, and he acted like he owned the house. Also, he started to bully Kelly. Over the years, Kelly really grew on our hearts. She has this effect that when she's happy, everyone around her is happy. When she's sad, everyone is sad. She was very cute and shy in general. So me and Dee got rather angry when the idiot started making really offensive jokes at her expense. I didn't do anything, shy as I am. But Dee wasn't going to let that happen and told the idiot to stop repeatedly. The idiot did not stop. The apartment's atmosphere was sinking rapidly and Kelly started crying on a weekly basis. It got so bad that the idiot spread disgusting rumors about her and made people cut ties with her. That was the thing that made Dee furious. Now, I was still too shy and scared to do anything, but Dee told the idiot that he was going to get kicked out if he didn't stop. You know what the idiot did? He stopped. It was surprising. He just stopped really fast and started to be nice to Kelly and the rest of the people living here. Too nice, as it turned out. A week later, he started bullying Kelly again, so Dee did the same again and confronted him. But this time, the idiot didn't give in. He had secretly taken evidence of Dee being a drug dealer, and now threatened to show all of that to the police if Dee wasn't going to let him do what he wanted. Dee didn't really have a choice, and things became worse. Kelly was getting bullied more, the idiot started paying even less rent, and the atmosphere was at its lowest. Here's where the bodybuilder, BB for short, comes in. He's not really a bodybuilder, but he goes to the gym often and has impressive muscles. He just came back from his 2-month holiday family visit and instantly made the idiot back off. This time, the idiot decided better not to mess with BB, and we had relative peace at the apartment. Now, you may ask, why didn't Kelly just leave? It's the same reason why the idiot was so scared from being thrown out. Apartments here are scarce, and the few that exist are incredibly expensive. So when you have an apartment where the owner pays 50% of the rent, you get really lucky. The bullying didn't stop though, it was just transferred. Remember that the idiot went to the same courses as Kelly. Yeah, exactly. It just happened to be that one of their teachers, which we will call bad teacher or BT for short, was a distant relative of the idiot. So the idiot could basically do what he wanted in the lectures and still get relatively good grades. In the university, he also started to harass her physically. Kelly started to skip those lectures, which made it only worse. Missing more and more lectures also gave the teacher a reason to hate Kelly, which he instantly did. Her grades dropped, although her skills were about as good as the other students, especially better than the idiot's. Well, end of the semester, and Kelly is devastated. The bullying in the apartment has pretty much stopped, but the bullying at the university more than makes up for it. One time, some followers of the idiot even harassed her. Luckily, I just happened to walk through that street, since it was literally on the way to the only store we really had in the area. While my appearance didn't scare anyone, my phone cam did, so they ran away. My trip to get some noodles and eggs became a rescue mission. That was the turning point. I don't know to this day why the idiot hated Kelly that much, but me and a guy we'll call Dave decided to do something about that. Who's Dave, you ask? A new guy in the apartment who really likes to constrict hexamine explosives. He's kind of our expert in that area, and that's something to keep in mind. Of course, what he does sometimes is not strictly legal, but he always keeps two eyes on everyone's security. So, we set up a plan and started preparations. Step 1. The idiot hated programming, something that I really love. He has obligatory lectures on general object-oriented programming, in which they were taking C#. So, it slowly established itself that I, as the expert somewhat in that area, made his assignments. It started off with him asking for help, but after a while the idiot realized that I wasn't really good at explaining things, that he hated programming, and that I wouldn't have the courage to complain if he just left me to do his work. Mean, but I got over it. So one day, with a lot of help from Kelly, I installed some software on his PC that recorded all keyboard presses. So, next time he logged in, we had his really secure password, his gamer tag, and birthday combined. Then, for the next few days, when the idiot got to sleep, I took his laptop to my room and searched for anything illegal. I didn't have to search long. He had a badly hidden folder where he had inappropriate videos stored which could get him to jail. And after more searching, I found out that BT had sent the idiot all the tests at least 1 week before. All of them with convenient solutions, well, all of them but 2. That was enough evidence to make him repeat 2 years of studying best case, and make him drop out entirely worst case. Also, I deleted his evidence of D's drugs. Step 2. BB's second grade cousins or SMTH like that were the owners of the only store we had in the area. BB didn't really like them much, that's why he lived with us, but they still had a bit of communication. They had told us about some guy they had repeatedly suspected stealing stuff. What a surprise, the description of the man perfectly matched the idiot. Since petty theft doesn't really happen around this area, they didn't have a security cam. We decided to gift them one of those Bluetooth security cams. One day, BB and I went over to their store and set it up in a little niche above the entrance that's hard to see. Essentially, you won't see the cam unless you really search. They gave us some really nice dinner as a payback. The dinner is not relevant, but I really liked the lasagna suoye. The cam is a cool one. It basically sends you a message through the app every time it registers a human coming. Of course, we deactivated the notifications, but you can still see all the people who entered in the app. So whenever the idiot came home with food, we checked the camera. The first week we were unsuccessful. He paid everything he took. But the Wednesday 1 week after setting up the cam, we finally got some footage of him stealing drinks and iced tea. We continued recording his stealing for 1 month and ended up having around $550 worth of food etc. stolen. What a jerk. Step 3. Remember Dave? When he came in, he quickly got me interested in his stuff, especially defusing time bombs. We always practiced with dummy bombs which felt extremely real, but didn't explode, just made a weird sound when the time went off. You really felt like a CS:GO counter-terrorist when you defused the dummy bomb. So after a while, the idiot also started getting interested in the bomb defusing stuff. This was after we had set up the plan to get revenge, and came as a welcome surprise. So Dave proposed teaching the idiot to defuse bombs. The idiot quickly accepted. But mind you, it was not defusing bombs the normal way. The idiot's dummy bombs were always constructed that way that they could be defused by just cutting off one cable. Specifically, the idiot's bombs always had a red cable and a few more. In each one of them, the red cable and one other would lead to defusing success. If you follow Dave's steps, you would almost always end up cutting through the other solution, not the red one, but the red one would always work too. So, after a while, the idiot started to see a pattern. He would start cutting the red cable instead of thinking. It got so far that Dave would just get the dummy bomb, cut the red cable, look if it worked, it always did, and be done with it in like 2 minutes. Of course, Dave told him not to rely on always cutting the red cable, but the idiot ignored him. That's exactly what we wanted. So, one day, Dave sneaked into the uni, set up a bomb in a carefully chosen location, a small studying room where we knew there were no cameras and was not really visited at all. The same day, after my afternoon lectures, I waited for the idiot to finish his. When he finished, I took him to a side and told him, "Wait a sec, I have to show you something I just found." "What?" "Come." I led him to the exact room where Dave had set up his bomb. It was at a wall, near the ground, looked somewhat like the dummy bombs the idiot had been defusing, and had a red cable. It was ticking down and was at like 2.5 hours, more than enough time to call the police and let a real defusing expert defuse the bomb. I saw this just a moment ago, and remembered you took that defusing training with Dave. You want to try defusing it, or do we want to call the cops? As the idiot, this may sound really weird, not calling the cops instantly, but him knowing that I'm really indecisive paired with the heat of the moment and his cockiness, he decided to defuse it. He took out his Swiss Army knife, held the knife to the red cable, and cut it through in one swift motion. I think it's pretty clear that this time the red cable was not the one to cut through. Dave did a wonderful job. The bomb exploded, but not in a big explosion. It destroyed a chair next to it, knocked the idiot to the ground, and made a hella loud sound. Oh yeah, it also produced a ton of smoke. I dragged the idiot out of the room, which was really filling up with smoke, closed the door, and called an ambulance. Someone else who had heard the explosion and saw the smoke had already called firefighters. Both me and the idiot got driven to the hospital. I didn't have any problems besides a bee-yapping in my ears, an after effect from the bomb. The idiot, who was just there when the bomb exploded, was in a worse condition, but still ended up relatively lucky. First-grade burns on the chest, a broken wrist from the knockback, and some real hearing problems. He may have some permanent hearing damage. Apart from that, he had nothing. I dragged him out pretty quickly, so no one of us breathed enough of the toxic smoke for it to have any effect. The day after the incident, some high-ranking staff of the university, an inspector with some policemen and me plus the idiot sat together, and we got interrogated, etc. It went relatively okay. Since we both were victims, we weren't really being suspected of planting the bomb. When the question, "Do you have any idea of who had done that?" came, I managed to say, "Not really," without sounding suspicious. After we were dismissed, I stayed until the idiot was out of earshot and asked to have a word with everyone. I started with telling the officers about the idiot's inappropriate videos. I had a USB there with screenshots. They wanted to get his laptop to have real evidence, so nothing happened right there. Possession of those kinds of inappropriate videos can get you to jail here though. Next, I followed that up with the security cam footage of the store, and told the officers he had stolen $550 worth of food, etc. They confirmed having gotten a call from BB's cousins. Next, I told the staff about BT sending the idiot the tests. I gave them another USB with all the proof sent tests, chat messages, and then I quickly excused myself because I really wanted my pulse to go under 150. Turns out, the idiot got sentenced to 2 years in jail for endangering other people and his inappropriate videos Piscesian combined. Also, he was expelled from the university with a note. Now this may not sound like much, but being expelled with a negative note means that he definitely won't get into the same university again, and that he will have a lot of trouble getting into another uni. BT was fired too. This was the good part. If you want to read the story like a Disney film, stop here. Not everything turned out nice though. Somehow police caught up with Dave setting up the bomb and fined him all the repair damage plus some $1,000. He also was assigned to cleaning up the school twice a week. At least, he could still continue studying. One day, police searched our house and found D's drugs, probably after a tip from the idiot, I don't know though. He was sent to jail for drug possession for 2 years. Story 2. I had always been a hardworking man, and I took great pride in my small business. I ran an online store from my home in the wealthy neighborhood of Maple Tree Estate, a fictional name, and I was careful to keep my work separate from my personal life. I made sure that there were no disruptions to my neighbors and thought I was doing everything right. However, the Homeowners Association, also known as the Association Managing Residential Properties, did not see things the same way. The president of the association, Mr. Charles, took issue with me running my business from my home and repeatedly fined me, claiming I was violating the community rules. I tried to explain to Mr. Charles that I was not doing anything wrong, but he refused to listen. He saw my business as a disturbance to the neighborhood and was determined to shut it down. "You can't run a business from your home, John," Mr. Charles told me at one of our association meetings. "It's not allowed according to the community rules." "I'm not disrupting anyone, Mr. Charles," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I run an online store, and all my transactions are conducted online. There's no noise or increased traffic at my house." "That may be true, but the rules are the rules," Mr. Charles responded sternly. "If you don't stop running your business from your home, I'll have no choice but to fine you again." I realized there was no reasoning with Mr. Charles, so I decided to take a different approach. I began openly defying the association's rules, setting up my business in a more visible location within my home and making a point to be noticed. Initially, Mr. Charles was enraged by my defiance. He fined me more frequently, attempting to force my compliance with the rules, but I refused to back down. I believed I had the right to run my business from home and would not be intimidated by the association. To my surprise, I wasn't alone in this. Many other residents of Maple Tree Estate were also tired of Mr. Charles's heavy-handed tactics, and they began to support me in my stand against the association. One day, Mr. Charles and several members of the association decided to take matters into their own hands. While I was away, they broke into my home and seized all my office equipment and assets. They left a note stating that they would not return my belongings until I signed a written agreement to cease my business operations from my home. What Mr. Charles and the association members didn't know was that my elderly father was in the house during the break-in. When they confronted him, he was terrified and, fearing for his safety, grabbed a gun for protection. He held the intruders at gunpoint until the police arrived, and they were arrested on the spot for charges that included unauthorized entry and theft. "I can't believe they would do something like this," my father said to me when I returned home and learned what had happened. "They have no right to treat you this way." I was equally shocked and felt violated that Mr. Charles and the association believed they could simply enter my home and take my belongings. However, I was immensely grateful to my father for defending our property and standing up for what was right. News of the incident spread quickly, and the residents of Maple Tree Estate were appalled and outraged. Many had grown weary of the association president's authoritarian approach and viewed the break-in as a clear violation of my rights. After filing criminal charges against Mr. Charles and the association members involved in the break-in, the case went to court. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and it was clear they had acted unlawfully by breaking into my home and confiscating my belongings. The judge ruled in my favor, finding Mr. Charles and the association members guilty of unauthorized entry and theft. Mr. Charles was sentenced to 6 months in prison, while the other members received probation and were ordered to pay restitution for the damages and stolen items. In addition to the criminal charges, Mr. Charles and the association members were forced to resign from their positions even before the court's final ruling. The community was in an uproar over the incident, and it was evident they had lost the trust and respect of the residents. I felt relieved that justice had been served. The experience had been trying, but I was glad to have come out on the other side. From that point on, I was able to run my business from home without further interference. Editor's note: some seemed confused about the confiscation part and how the note was left. After they seized most of the equipment in my office, They left the note on my desk, but were interrupted when they noticed my father approaching with his gun drawn, ordering them to stay put until the police arrived. Story 3. This story took place in my early 20s in a part of town where most houses and apartments are rented to college students. It's a fun place to live when you're that age, but I couldn't imagine living there now. Anyway, I digress. I don't drive, so I was a frequent walker, and I was often experimenting with one forbidden substance or another. However, on this particular day, for some reason, I was completely sober. Despite this, I was in a particularly good mood, even with a bit of a skip in my step. I was lost in my head, daydreaming about something pleasant. At this point, it's important to mention that I have a nervous tic that resembles the head movement of the famous musician Stevie Wonder. The tic gets worse under certain circumstances and almost disappears under others. When I'm daydreaming, it tends to go wild also when I'm tired, nervous, or distracted. When I'm focused, however, the tic almost vanishes. It's also worth noting that I'm generally unaware of my head's movement, as my eyes move in the opposite direction. So, I'm walking near the hospital, which sits at the center of this part of town. I'm daydreaming, likely with my nervous tic acting up. Suddenly, I spot a hospital security vehicle that looks just like a police car. Naturally, I snap to attention, and my tic probably disappears. The guard drives past me but noticeably slows down when he sees me. I feel a bit nervous, but without reason, since I was sober, had no arrest warrants, and wasn't carrying anything illegal. A minute or so after the guard's car is out of sight, I calm down and almost immediately start daydreaming again, likely with my tic coming back. A few minutes later, I notice the security guard's car again, and once more, my tic likely goes away. The guard pulls over to the side and stops me. At this point, I'm a bit more nervous because I don't like dealing with authority, and I'm sure this makes the guard think I'm up to no good. It turns out he's a police officer, perhaps off duty, but still a police officer. I didn't have my wallet on me, so when he asked to see my identification, I didn't have it. He was convinced I was under the influence of something. To clarify, I've had officers think my nervous tic was a sign of substance use before, even though I've never been under the influence when questioned by an officer. He ordered me to sit on the curb while he called for backup from the city police. I was a compliant citizen. I sat quietly while the guard asked me for my social security number, name, and birth date. I provided the information, but he kept reading it back to me incorrectly, and I'd have to correct him. We repeated this routine for about 10 minutes. Finally, an on-duty police officer arrived. Unfortunately, this didn't calm me down. The officer talked to the guard first, then approached me. He asked for my information, which I provided again. When he asked what I was doing, I explained that I was just walking by on my way to a coffee shop when the guard detained me without reason. The officer told me to wait while he verified my information. He went to his car for a few minutes, then returned and told me I was free to go. As I was leaving, I overheard the officer telling the guard that I hadn't done anything wrong and there was no reason to hold me. I arrived at the coffee shop frustrated by the incident, and naturally, it was the topic of conversation with my friends. They encouraged me to take action. I'm not usually one to take legal action, but I thought I could at least express my dissatisfaction. I wrote a letter to the hospital administrators, explaining that I was walking on a public sidewalk next to their hospital and had been improperly detained by one of their guards based solely on a documented medical condition. I mentioned that, while I had experienced similar misunderstandings before, I expected a hospital to be a place where I wouldn't face discrimination due to a medical condition. About a week later, I walked by the same hospital and saw the security guard. He no longer had a nice security vehicle. Now, he was guarding a parking lot on the night shift. I'll always remember purposefully walking under a bright street light to get his attention, flashing a big smile, and walking away. On a related note, for the next year or so, I received periodic phone calls from different vice presidents of the hospital, apologizing and clearly trying to ensure I wasn't considering legal action. I received a call almost every 3 weeks for the following year. I know some might say I should have sued, But honestly, I felt the hospital had addressed the issue, and that was all that mattered to me. Story 4. My husband and I are in our late 30s and have chosen to live without children. Some people from a community for people without kids suggested I share our story here as well, so enjoy the saga. My husband and I spent nearly a decade saving to move to a tropical paradise. About 2 years ago, we finally took the plunge and relocated to our dream location. Housing here is extremely expensive, think Hawaii-level prices, so we could only afford one half of a duplex. It's a beautiful spot on the water, complete with dock space for our boat. Unfortunately, our neighbors in the other unit include Karen, her boyfriend Billy Bob, and her 3 rambunctious children. Setup. For a while, we would visit the property occasionally, staying for a week or so at a time. However, now we live here full-time. The entire duplex was originally owned by an older gentleman who rented out both sides. Each side of the duplex is quite different. One side is a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom unit, while the other side has only 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. We purchased the 5-bedroom side. Our side also includes around 90% of the backyard, a gazebo, and approximately 150 feet of dock space, since it's located on a corner. The other side has a smaller backyard, a patio, and only about 15 feet of dock space. The rental agreements specify that renters are entitled to their respective backyards. However, since there were no fences, all the renters had previously shared the entire backyard space. After we bought the property, Karen immediately began insisting that they continue sharing our backyard. I told her that if she asked politely, we might try to accommodate her, but she took this to mean she could use our backyard whenever she wanted. Party incident. One day, my husband and I were relaxing with drinks outside when a delivery truck showed up to set up a giant inflatable structure in our backyard. I asked Karen what she was doing, and she explained it was for her child's birthday party. She even had the audacity to say it was a family and friends-only event, so we needed to stay inside. Not wanting to ruin a child's birthday, I told Karen that after this party, she would no longer have access to our backyard. Karen shrugged and continued setting up for the party. During the event, a tipsy guest wandered into our house, much to our surprise. When I told him that Karen's house was on the other side, he said, "Oh, Karen said she owned the entire property and we could use whichever bathroom was available." I directed him to Karen's bathroom. Shortly afterward, Karen stormed into our house, yelling about how we made her look bad to her friends and how selfish we were for not sparing a bathroom. She added that we didn't deserve all that space since it was just the 2 of us. I told Karen to get out or I'd call the police, and she finally left. The party wrapped up soon after. Backyard remodel. After the party incident, we decided it was time to define our space clearly and put up a fence. Since we were already spending money, we opted to update the patio, install a fire pit, and add an outdoor kitchen. While the contractor was on site, nosy Karen came over to investigate. Since the fence was to be the last thing built, I was vague and only mentioned the patio update. She looked pleased, clearly assuming she'd be able to use it too. When the workers started on the fence, Karen came out, yelling for them to stop. I told the workers to continue and told Karen to stay out of it. True to form, Karen called the police. What happened next was pure amusement for me, after explaining to the officer that we were building a fence on our own property, and that the landlord of whom Karen was not one was aware of it. The officer gave Karen a stern lecture. She went back inside, slamming the sliding door so hard it sounded like something cracked. We completed our fence, and I thought that would be the end of it. But, of course, it wasn't. The boat incident. Billy Bob soon entered the picture, and he was just as much of a problem as Karen. He would toss cigarette butts and empty beer cans over our fence as a way of standing up for Karen. I didn't expect to encounter behavior like this in paradise, but Billy Bob fit the stereotype. Billy Bob had a 30-foot fishing boat. However, with only 15 feet of dock space on their side, there wasn't room for it. Since we had extra dock space, we rented out some spots on a month-to-month basis. Our renters come and go, so if they leave without paying, we generally don't think much of it. We had one renter who had tied up their boat along the property line, but Billy Bob wanted that space. So, Karen and Billy Bob posed as us while we were out of town, told the renter to leave by the end of the month, and then parked Billy Bob's boat there. I only found out weeks later when the renter left a bad review on the rental site, saying we were rude and had gone back on a verbal agreement to let them stay longer. Confused, I made a phone call and quickly pieced everything together. I contacted the police, who informed Karen and Billy Bob that they needed to move their boat, or it would be towed. Karen and Billy Bob began shouting that the boat was entirely on their property. It wasn't. Then changed to saying that no one could own the water true, but a seawall is deeded. They accused us of lying, and at some point, Billy Bob even punched an officer and was taken to jail. I felt sorry for the officers, so I brought them snacks the next day as a peace offering. I later won a small claims suit against them for lost rental income. But, of course, I haven't seen a cent. I eventually convinced the original renters to come back by offering a few free months as compensation. Final revenge. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Get ready for some well-deserved justice. With the housing market dropping, we were looking for ways to reinvest our savings when an ideal opportunity presented itself. The original landlord, who owned both properties, needed cash and was tired of managing the duplex from 2,000 miles away, no surprise, considering Karen's constant calls about minor issues. His only condition was that we allow the poor single mother who had been renting from him for 8 years to finish her lease, which ended in July. With the means to invest and the opportunity to choose our neighbors, we jumped at the chance. Since we didn't need a real estate agent or mortgage, and an inspection had been done recently, the deal closed in less than 2 weeks. Karen was aware there was a change in ownership. We registered the property under a company name, but she didn't know who the new owners were until 8 days ago. I went over to Karen's house, knocked on the door, and she greeted me with, "What do you want?" Smiling. I handed her our landlord information and gently reminded her that rent was due by Friday, but she could just hand me the check if that was easier. I've heard of people's faces turning white with shock, but this was the first time I'd actually seen it. I told Karen we'd honor her lease until the end of July, but she should plan to move afterwards since we intended to remodel the unit for the next tenants. Update #1. Not much to update so far. Karen and her family's lease isn't up until the end of July. Rent has been paid on time, but I don't think they have another place lined up yet. We've sent a 30-day notice stating we won't renew the lease and offered to waive the termination fee and prorate July if they leave early. Beyond the usual loud parties and a few police calls because the kids were throwing lit fireworks at our boat, nothing new has happened. Update #2 August 2020. Due to local restrictions, we can't proceed with eviction, even though Karen hasn't been paying rent. Fortunately, after a huge fight with Karen, Billy Bob was arrested, and he hasn't returned. Our attorney says that once restrictions are lifted, we'll be able to have them escorted off the property. Until then, Karen's been acting smug, playing loud music, and littering. Our elderly parents need to move closer for medical reasons, and we're eager to complete the remodel to accommodate them. We're trying to stay calm with Karen, but it's draining. Update #3 December 2020. Life took an unexpected turn. Karen's mother, Susan, moved in after her landlord declined to renew her lease. Susan is wonderful. She's appalled by Karen's behavior and has been working to improve things at home. The kids are behaving better, and Karen seems almost subdued. Susan and I have become friends, sharing drinks and baking together on weekends. Since no one traveled for Thanksgiving or Christmas, we hosted an outdoor holiday feast with games. It was a lovely time, and even Karen was pleasant. I offered Susan free rent until they find a new place, but she insisted on paying half, which covers taxes and insurance. We've switched to a month-to-month lease, and Susan plans to eventually move back home, possibly with Karen. It's peaceful for now, so I'm in no hurry for them to leave.